Welcome to Urbanomics on Cannabis Tech. I'm your host, Christina Eder, and joining me today, as always, is my co-host, Tony Solano from iHemp Manufacturing. Welcome back, Tony.
As always, thank you for having me, Christina. I'm so excited to be here, and I'm happy to have another female entrepreneur as a guest, again, from my home state of Colorado. Woohoo.
Absolutely. We are so excited to have our guest today. Summar Star Haeske from Envirotexiles is here to talk about hemp and hemp textiles processing, hemp fashions. And I actually met Summar this year at the NOCO Hemp Expo, and I was so impressed with her line. I said, Tony, we've got to get Summar on the show. So Summar, thank you so much for taking time out today and doing this podcast with us.
Yay!
Oh, thank you both so much, Christina, Tony. Pleasure to be with you today. And all these exciting hemp talks that we all get to share with the world. So thank you for having me on the show.
Yeah, it's not just about, touch it, taste it, smell it, smoke it. It's what else can you do with it? So let's dig in.
Absolutely. That is the whole point of this podcast, was to start talking to some of the other types of hemp producers out there. So we've had Greg Wilson from Hempwood on the show, and we have had Carla Boyd from Hempway Foods. And now we're going to shift gears a little bit, Summar, and talk to you about fashion and textiles and hemp processing from that perspective. So I would love to have you start us off. Just tell us, how did you get into this kind of business?
Well, technically I am a fifth generation natural fiber development, design, and production in my family. So it kind of just runs in our blood, really. But I'd love to always kind of tell people how hemp fashion really started about 8,000 years ago. That was documented anyhow. There could be even many thousands of years before that, as history kind of reveals itself. Hemp fiber and hemp fashion has been around for well before all of us. But it was really my mother that got me into it, because she was a natural fiber designer and technician in her career. And back in the 80s, she kind of really couldn't continue seeing the work conditions and the unfair labor practices that were happening in India. She started a walkout in a factory, and the factory presidents, instead of listening and putting some more investment and care into their facility and their workers, instead escorted my mother to the airport to leave. So, at that time, she was very famous for designing the gourdey skirt, which back then almost every woman had in their wardrobe. It was a paneled, crunchy silk with two bells that hung from it, and you could just wrap it up and throw it in a bag and go anywhere. So she literally came home to New York City to a trade show to let the market know, hey, I'm available if anybody, wants to hire me. And again, they all knew who she was because of this famous skirt. And she ended up getting picked up by one of the first hemp companies. There was the three Davids. They had Earth Goods and Earth Tribe. These guys had been backpacking up in the mountains of Nepal and came across this old hemp fabric that was only about 12 inches wide, because it was all hand loomed. And she goes, oh, no, your samples didn't show up. And they said, no, our samples are here. And they had a tube top and a mini skirt hanging up in the booth, because they didn't know what else to make with this fabric that was only this wide. So, of course, that kind of started my mother's journey, going, well, I can design with that real narrow fabric. We just did a whole line that was a paneled pattern, is how you would kind of describe that in the fashion world. And shortly later, Steve D'Angelo of Harborside, a lot of people know him on the other side of the cannabis scene. He actually had one of the very first hemp fashion lines. And he had hunted my mother, and he said, I hear there's hemp in the hills of Transylvania, Romania. Go find it and develop this line for me. And she ended up getting to Romania about 6 months after the assassination of Ceausescu. So the country had just gone through a revolution, but really we're kind of left with nothing. And it was mostly rebels at this point. The people were hungry. They had disassembled the equipment to sell off any scrap of metal. They had even been disassembling the building and trading bricks for loaves of bread to survive. And so Mom gets there, and very long story short, she gets there and calls Steve and says, Steve, here's the situation. What do you think? I mean, this is going to be a real program that's going to take a lot of work. And he said, put together what it's going to take, and signed off. And they imported equipment from Germany to rebuild the factories. And within about 2.5 years, Mom had standardized a collection of fabrics and finished products and hit the market. So, at that time I was just 8, 9 years old, and I was living with my father in Denver while she was all over the world all the time. And it was funny because, we finally had these great hemp products, but nobody to buy them. And so that led us to opening one of the nation's first hemp shops here in Glenwood Springs, right across the river from the largest hot springs pool in the world. So we managed to get to tourists all over the world from our little town and our little store. And I started at 10 years old making hemp necklaces and learning the fabrics and fibers and educating people on hemp in the hemp store. So it was interesting to see a full circle. Mom was supplying some of the first hemp brands, and then I'd turn around and order those products for the store as well.
That's one heck of a roller coaster ride. So how many years do you have in the industry now focused on hemp textiles?
Well, Mom has been in hemp textiles now 38 years. I was acknowledged when I was 10 years old. I was sitting in the very first Senate hearings for industrial hemp before the revolution. So that was in 1992 in Denver. It was the Senator Casey bills. And it's still crazy to think that way back then we only lost by one vote. And who would have ever imagined it was going to take 22 years later to finally make wave in Colorado? But honestly, we were, on the back end of Amendment 64 that was a medical cannabis bill. So, it was really interesting as a kid growing up, in the capitals, educating our representatives and in the factories and in the stores and going, we thought that hemp was going to lead the way for everything, and then here we were going, wait, hold on, wait for us. We've got, a big impact to make in so many sectors that desperately need alternatives to these nasty materials we're just surrounded with.
That brings up a very good question. You mentioned nasty materials that hemp is in opposition to. With what you know in your experience, Summar, where do you see hemp delivering the greatest value to disrupt the chokehold? Is it cotton? Is it polyester? Where do you see the biggest weakness in the existing fashion industry as an opportunity to capitalize on for hemp and hemp textiles?
Well, it's important that everyone understands that the 3 most toxic industries in the world are plastics, building materials, and textiles and fashion. So, when we're talking about how is hemp going to make such an impact, well, hemp can do all of those things and do it better, So we're going to see hemp going after the building materials. Hemp and the plastics is going to be, a little bit longer. Hemp can't be compared to a synthetic. It's completely different animals. We're talking natural fibers that are literally hair-like fibers spinning together to make a yarn compared to a vat full of chemicals that has some filler material and spitting it out the other end like fishing line. It's one continuous polymer now. It's no longer fibers. And it's similar when you're looking at plastics. So, we're going to see some serious advancements in the plastics, but when it comes to textiles, hemp can replace nearly everything. So over the last 2.5 decades, we've outbeat the price of linens. We've outbeat the price of upholstery weights. We've outbeat the price of silks. We're right up there with high-end materials. We're likely never going to compete with conventional cottons and very low quality fibers or yarns because hemp just doesn't really lend itself to those kind of developments. But when you start to look at what has the fashion world and a lot of the commercial world, is a biggie, quite a few years ago, we had done a video that's on our website. Everybody can check it out under our media page. There's this video where we're taking one of the fabrics that had been approved to be a commercial use material. It passed all criteria. It's what gets put front and center and, designers that are doing new build outs. And we had our hemp cloth next to it. And all we did to just show people was take a lighter underneath the fabric and showed how quickly this stuff just lit right up and then also turned into drippy plastic where the hemp, we couldn't even get it to light. We started looking at that and we're going, how did this synthetic material even pass these strict criterias into commercial use? You've got to pass fire standards. You've got to be able to show that it's not a toxic material. And so, that got my mother going, we've got to dig into more lab testing. And so, we started doing a lot of lab testing where we would not only send our hemp fabrics, but also have those comparison materials because we learned really quickly when we did the antimicrobial, antifungal property tests. Okay, that was Barbara was the first one to do those. And when the test came back, it came back and said, okay, not only is hemp antibacterial, but so is polyester. Well, we went, okay, we've got to have the opposition ready with an answer of why it's more important to use our hemp than it would be polyester in that kind of a setting. So it was like, okay, now what else is important to know about these fabrics? Well, what's the toxicity level on those fabrics? Are they going to burn? What's the liability, using these kind of materials in these settings? And that's where we ended up starting to see that the standard operating procedures in a lot of these laboratories were doing tests that weren't even at body temperature. And we went, well, how are these tests accurate if they're not even at body temperature, you guys?
So when in doubt, just set it on fire and you'll have your answer.
I mean, that is one of my mother's go-tos. Between the magnifying glass and taking it outside and lighting it on fire, and not only is she looking at how it's melting or dripping, but what kind of smoke is coming from it. Is it a black smoke? Is it a white smoke? What kind of ash is forming, or is there no ash? There's a lot of different things you can do to kind of tell with a home test, but I don't advise people doing that at home because if you were to burn a really nasty material on accident, you could very easily give yourself benzene poisoning and be sick and wondering, why you're in the bathroom throwing up. So be very careful, don't go doing that. But it was interesting because it told us, hey, we've got to now re-perform these tests because they're not to our standards. And hey, raise the temperature 10 degrees, then raise it again, then raise it again. And let's see where the point is that we start to see these offsetting. And, one of the best analogies to use for people And that really kind of triggers the thought process that we're all trying to educate people on and start implementing in our day-to-day lives, is something that we all probably remember when they said, don't leave your plastic water bottle in your car on a hot day. Why is that? Because those toxins are leaching into the water and then you're drinking it. Well, it's the same thing with what we wear. It's the same thing with what we surround ourselves with. And so when we start kind of putting these things together and attributing all this stuff that's around us, especially, what we're putting in our body and directly on our body, being so very important, that we really have to start paying more attention to these things.
So stop using hardwood flooring that has formaldehyde in it and use hemp wood, and then go back and check your wardrobe and start switching to hemp-based fabrics.
That's right. I mean, especially, if you live in a hot area or you like to keep the heat up in the house, I mean, you've got to start paying attention to those things. And there's more and more information coming out all the time right now. People should look into their home air quality. There's a ton of new tests being revealed saying, hey, all those dryer sheets you use or the candles you're burning in your house are actually seriously affecting your air quality. And, this is affecting us in our health. So, when we start to think about, what we wear, and, a lot of people will say to me, first off, people don't always know how great hemp fabric has come over the years. They automatically think hemp and they kind of think itchy, scratchy, hippie, jute-like, gunny sack-like. And I'm going, no, wait, let me show you. It's so great. There's so many options for everybody anymore. But so not only is the fabric just amazing, and everything that you love and know in your wardrobe, we now have in hemp. So those designers can recreate those amazing special pieces for you in a healthy material. But then you've got people that will say, well, I can't afford hemp, or I just can't, I wish I could afford to support all these great products and eat all these things that I want, and support all these amazing things that I would like to have. And I think it's important for people to start reevaluating how we consume, right? We are consumer addicts in this country. Let's just admit it. We all kind of can be in some way or another. We have our little, things that we love, or our hobbies, or our, whatever it is.
Marquee brand name recognition. I have to buy Pop-Tarts. I'm so used to buying, prepackaged frozen burgers, but, I could buy, a nice Hempway Foods burger instead.
Well, and that's where you could say, okay, as a consumer that's trying to be more conscious, if you love your Pop-Tarts, okay, and say you normally would have a Pop-Tart every night, start to go, I'm going to dedicate 2 nights a week to my hemp burger instead, and slowly kind of transition that, because your health's going to start to thank you for it, and you're going to feel better, and it's going to push you towards wanting to eat more hemp. And same thing with what you wear. Instead of us buying 30 t-shirts a year, save up and do 10 to 15 hemp t-shirts that are not only going to be healthy for you, but are also going to last a lot longer too. So in the end, you actually have a lot more garments that made it after 10 years than, those conventional cottons that shrunk up in the wash, the colors faded, whatever it is. It's definitely, there's no comparison when you start to shift your buying consciousness towards hemp, that not only do you notice it in your pocket, but you notice it in your health, and you can also really feel good about the fact that you've played a part now to be in this movement, and every little thing that we consciously do makes such a big difference. And, I don't know if you guys have noticed, like even the bottled water companies, they're trying to eliminate plastic. So instead of a big cap, it's now this little itty bitty cap, right? And they say,
Yeah. Oh, and the whole every bottle back campaign from Big Sugar and this, that, and the other. But the good thing is, in terms of corporate consciousness, everybody is now coming full circle to the circular economy and sustainability. So when you're talking about things that you can do with hemp, we're talking about carbon offsetting, carbon neutral, carbon negative, and all the ESG initiatives, and supporting local farming and restorative agriculture.
Well, and then one of the things that I would like to point out, Summar, that that you just kind of talked about, there are so many different facets there. And, when you're talking about toxins in our environment and in all of these places, we frequently hear the argument that, they know that just a little bit of that's not going to hurt us. But then when you factor in that it's in our clothing, it's in the air that we breathe, it's in the foods that we eat, it's in, these things, that all adds up. And the more exposure that we get to these toxins and to these chemicals, the more that those chemicals are going to have an impact on our bodies and on our future. I mean, this is a topic near and dear to my heart because I lost both my parents to lung cancer because of chemicals in the fields and things that they were doing in Iowa. And so that's part of the reason why I'm here in Colorado, was to get away from being surrounded or being in that environment where there was a constant fear of what chemicals were there in the air. I'd already watched it wreak havoc on my family. And that's the whole thing. So then you factor in cosmetics, you factor in our lotions and sunscreens and all of these things that we're putting on our skin, we're putting inside our bodies, we're wearing. We're being exposed to so many toxins on a regular basis. It's absolutely terrifying. And so I think you're right in terms of people really need to reprioritize. We need to look at some of these things that we're doing, make those reductions. And even if it is just baby steps or just starting to maybe replace an item or two of clothing a year with a hemp product, or, Tony, switching out your hemp whey burger for a regular meat burger, or, something along those lines, those incremental steps add up.
Absolutely, they do. And that little bit of plastic on that bottle, the company can promote that they've eliminated enough plastic to wrap around the earth twice in a single year. Just from that. So, when people are thinking about, oh, well, does it really matter? Or does it really make a difference? Or, we often hear even these days, does my vote even matter anymore? And yes, it absolutely does. Every last little thing, every company that you support that's doing something good, everything that you consciously decide to purchase for yourself is going to do good. And it's ultimately going to also do good for our environment. And, a lot of people will say, well, you're such an environmentalist, Summar. You're such an environmentalist. And I say, no, I'm actually a humanitarian, because I want us to have an environment that humans can continue to survive sustainably and healthy for generations to come. It's like, and that reflects on us being stewards of the environment, and we're here to help take care of it. And I know that it can be difficult for people that are in cities sometimes to get involved as much or see the impact that it's having. But it's so important that people understand that, yes, it does matter. Yes, you just played such a huge part in that day that you decided to do something, or that you went out and voted. Look at what we've seen in this hemp movement and the resurgence of hemp for the United States in just the last 8 years. And that was us putting our vote where we wanted it, putting our voice where we need it and where we see it needs to go, so that we can start to have a better future. And, so many of these toxic industries are actually very desperate for these natural materials. We have companies that are calling us, and they're not calling us necessarily because they're looking for hemp. They're literally desperate for any natural material they can get their hands on, because there just isn't enough in the world. And what they do have doesn't perform to what they need. So, when they're being stuck with GMO corn stalk waste or sugarcane stalk waste, they're going, this stuff doesn't even work for us, you guys, so we're going to see hemp make such a huge impact on some of the largest toxic industries that we have on the planet in this country, because we have to start from the ground up. And with textiles, this is the most important thing with where we are in the US right now. And of course, a lot of you have watched the CBD, boom, and it made sense why the industry decided that was where they were going to start. Okay, let's just accept that and know it had to start somewhere. And now we're kind of seeing that bubble burst, and everybody's kind of starting to get more real and back down to earth about, well, no, we need true sustainable crops, real industrial hemp, regenerative agriculture, companion planting, rotation crops, things that we kind of lost that are going to help our soils, but also be great for our hemp and our other crops. But when it comes to textiles and fiber and composites, the number one most important thing for everybody to understand is that if we're going to build a textile industry in this country, we have to start with non-wovens. And non-wovens will then lead us into wovens. So as long as we do it properly and in a mechanical process, we are going to maintain the highest values and our endless results to continue growing and being the solution to so many of these materials in the future.
Can you break down the difference between wovens and non-wovens and give some examples?
Yeah, so, non-wovens are going to be like your matting materials, erosion materials, raw products that go into different components and parts, like car parts, a huge market. Henry Ford's first car was made of hemp, and that was actually fibers and composites that were used to be kind of your holding agent in these molds. So, you can do almost anything. We can be building every kind of plastic, all kinds of forms, lots of different products like in China.
Frisbees.
Okay, I forget.
Straws. Utensils.
But I mean, there's so much building going on. And, in China, they actually use the hemp fiber to encase all of the underground pipe systems. These are things that right now, so that it protects it and lasts forever. I don't think we have any protection in ours. I know I had to have my sewer line, redone here in Glenwood. And when they dug it up, it was the old clay, pipes that had no protection around them that maybe would have made it all these years if it had. There's just so many things. But, it's important for people to understand that when we're taking hemp and we're making it into a fabric, there's really 5 ways to produce a hemp fabric. And of course, we know the old traditional by hand method. The 8,000 years ago, the people were literally chewing the fiber with their teeth to clean it and then hand spinning, so we've got, and obviously we're not going to be chewing hemp fiber, but we're also not going to be able to be processing it by hand and think that we're going to mass produce or standardize or make any real environmental difference on that kind of a level. So then, that by hand is gone. Then we've got mechanical processing. This is what's so important. So our mechanical processing versus our chemical processing. So there's viscose processing, that is the most toxic process on earth to turn plants into fabric. It's got over 120 chemicals, including formaldehydes and benzenes, and it's spit out the other end like fishing line. We've got our traditional rayons. Rayons are also a very high toxicity process. Not quite as bad as viscose, but still pretty bad and still spitting out one end like fishing line. And now we've got this new cottonized hemp process. And so, this is a chemical process as well, although it's still maintaining a fiber. So, when you hear cottonized, basically it has cut our hemp short, and because of the chemical process it has to go through, it's depleting our hemp of all the natural adherent benefits that we've all grown to love. So when you're justifying, well, I can buy this hemp t-shirt or this hemp backpack or what, a hemp wedding gown, whatever it is, and justify that not only do I know it's going to last longer and it's going to be healthier against my body, but it has natural adherent antibacterial, antifungal properties. It's anti-yeast. It's anti-static. I mean, it is like bringing all these wonderful things to us. And it's interesting because once you start wearing hemp, and of course, I've been wearing it for so long, I can't wear a polyester blouse to save my life because my body won't even allow me to. It's like sweating and crying and going, what are you doing to us? You can't put us in this. Your body just can never go back. After wearing natural fibers, you'll notice that you really feel the difference. And so, not only do we want to keep our benefits and why hemp is so wonderful, but we also want to keep the values so that as our industry grows and as we're implementing all these new processing lines, we're going to be able to continue to spread those lines further and create more and more of different grades and higher values. A good example is like my mother's decorticator. Okay. She is right now cutting the fiber short, knowing that there's no way to utilize a true long fiber hemp in this country. So we have to make sure the fiber is usable for where it's going to go to those non-wovens. And then as there's enough hemp fiber in this country and we can start getting real about the next step, which is a natural DeGumming facility that nobody seems to be talking about, that fiber, when we decorticate the outer ribbon of the fiber from the inner woody core, the hurd, that ribbon, and that's why it's called a bast fiber, a bast ribbon fiber. That ribbon is still encased with a lot of plant cellulose and lignins, and that fiber needs to be cleaned before it can ever go to combing, carding, spinning, or anything else in your woven textile fabric world. So, we've got to have a whole lot of fiber in this country to justify building out a state-of-the-art natural fiber degumming facility. And, that facility needs to have a wastewater treatment center on site, not because the waters are toxic, but because they're full of plant sludge, and so how cool will that be down the line when somebody comes along and goes, we can take that plant sludge and start making adhesives and glues and all these great new other eco products, once we get to that point. So, it's very interesting to watch a new, and we have to call it multiple marketplace, foundation with this plant, because it really can lend itself to so many areas coming into a country that, needs more manufacturing. Companies need more natural materials. The idea of not only having wonderful, healthy, sustainable crops growing in this country and producing those goods and those great healthy jobs here, but also getting ourselves back on the global trade and exporting our hemp. Like, what a concept that, we have this opportunity in this country to be the ones to have that model and do it right. Because right now, when you look at the global positioning of hemp, each country has kind of focused on its area. Of course, China's known for textiles, always has, probably always will be for at least the next 20 years. They've actually been focusing on high-tech stuff for about 20 years, and they're making the shift. But, Canada's known for the hemp seed oil. Europe's known for the building materials. No country has actually proven the model of full plant processing and turnkey, development off of one crop. So, we have the opportunity to do that in this country, and I see it happening, and I wish everyone well, but I also feel like we all have to really know, especially when it comes to fabrics, that we're in a country that has a very big synthetic fabric industry. That's all we have left. We don't have a lot of natural fiber processing. It is. And, there's no label laws in this country that tell us what things are usually. I mean, ultimately, that's the big problem, is it's like, okay, if you're going to make junk, at least tell us it's junk. There's enough of us out there that want to be able to know, read it, and make our educated decision. And the labeling laws are what's more important than anything. So we can start deciphering between these products and making the educated decision to go green. So, know the difference, trust your hand, go into your closet, start feeling your favorite blouses and your favorite outfits, and close your eyes and feel that fabric. Let it kind of move in your hand. And start to learn what it feels like. Oh, okay, well, this is what polyester feels like, and this is what rayon feels like, and here's a cotton poly blend. And, start to understand, because, as products are hitting the market, and there may not be always a full transparency, and there sure as heck is no label law, you're going to be able to trust your own hand and know exactly what you're feeling and standing behind. So that's my biggie.
So I want to touch on that, and you talking about the synthetics market that we have here. And one of the conversations that we had right before we went on camera, you had talked about a problem with some mislabeling and some synthetics that are being produced and being labeled as hemp. And, it was shocking for me, because when I think synthetics in the industry that I'm in, I'm always thinking about synthetic cannabinoid production. I never once dreamed that someone would want to produce a synthetic hemp fiber. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Isn't that crazy? Yeah, I mean, so London Fashion Week was the end of last month, and London Fashion Week decided to call out the greenwashing in the fashion industry. Europe is setting a ton of new rules and guidelines around toxic textile manufacturing and fashion. So even, not allowing our old garments and soft goods, our sheets, our towels, whatever is made of a fabric would be a soft goods in our lives. Not letting soft goods end up in the landfills anymore. They also are saying we don't want to see recycled plastic pop bottles going to fabric and then being on people's bodies or in their homes. We know how toxic these materials are. So even though it was a solution to deal with plastics, guess what? Those plastics are better off going to building pallets that can be reused a million times, and we're not cutting down trees with wooden pallets that get busted and fall apart. Crates, things that we really need to start offsetting. No more wood and trees coming down, and not a product that's against our bodies or in our homes. But what a lot of people didn't realize, that what that was going to trigger is, the Controlled Union is a very big certification group. And so they're the ones that really kind of pushed with another group in Europe and said, no more, and we're coming out big in London Fashion Week. And not a few days later, the Federal Trade Commission in the US said, well, it's about time we finally put the book down then, because back in 2009, they implemented a lawsuit called Bamboozling Consumers. And so we're going to use bamboo as the example, because this is now what's happening to hemp. So it'll kind of help explain, and it's really important for people to understand about bamboo, because that's a big one that's in a lot of conscious consumer homes. And so, the shift of the 2000s, bamboo hit the market, and by 2009, the Federal Trade Commission launched a lawsuit. It was literally called bamboozling consumers, where they said, not only can you not call this stuff natural or organic, but you can't even call it natural. And we're going to implement a new label law. And basically, what it's so important for people to understand is, here's bamboo that is this wonderful, sustainable, organically grown crop that was then harvested and taken to the most toxic processing on earth to make a fabric. Okay, so that end fabric is no longer anything natural, organic, or even a natural fiber. It's been turned into that fishing line and spit out the other end. And so, if you look up, anybody can look it up online right now and go, the FTC lawsuit, bamboo, and they're going to see the FTC is now going after Walmart and Target and saying, we've been warning you since 2009, and now you're going to get fined. We told you you couldn't sell anything as bamboo, and it had to be listed as rayon. Okay. So I hate to be the bearer of bad news to any conscious consumers that have been going out of their way to buy bamboo, because it's so easily misunderstood. And, I feel for the people that got misled in this whole crazy kind of terminology, in this greenwash labeling. But it's so important that we understand it, and that we, understand that this isn't just the case with bamboo. We're now seeing it with hemp. Hemp viscose, hemp rayon, and this cottonized hemp is hitting the market in a storm. And because there's no label laws, they don't have to list it as such. So it's so important to go and learn how to trust your hand, learn how to look at a material, or go in the store and start paying attention to what's on the label, so that you can put it together for yourself and go, hey, no, this says it's this and looks like that. And, it's this company that's been doing all this great stuff. Yeah, this is a really great product I want to get behind, because, we don't want to see in 10, 20 years from now that the same thing is happening to our precious hemp, because it is happening. And it's important everybody understands it. So it's one of those unfortunate truths that, as things get popular and there's a market, a lot of times we're having to worry about the big bad companies coming in and trying to take over. And so, be one step ahead of the game. If people are listing it as some fancy trademark name, oftentimes that means they're trying to hide something. So what is it? Define the transparency, be honest and upfront with what your product is. The more generic and to the point with hemp, it's usually going to more likely be the good stuff.
What are some of your hottest selling items through Envirotexiles? Where's your biggest customer base?
Tony, I used to be able to answer that question. For years, I could answer that question. And in the last 10 years, it is so across the board that it's really hard to kind of pinpoint what's the most popular. I will tell you some of our biggest industries that we supply are the hotels and contract accounts. Ecotourism is such a big market, and they go through a lot of fabric with a lot of those kind of programs. But there's a lot more liability with those programs, and we have to, treat our fabric in a different way. So for example, even though my fabric is listed as pre-shrunk, it's gone through a washing to be pre-shrunk. Now it's natural fiber, and there's a step in the process called reframing onto the roll. Basically what that means is, after you washed it, you're going to end up with a wrinkled up mess if you don't reframe and do a quick little steam as it's getting rolled up onto the roll, right? So in that step, there's a little bit of pull left. So there's always going to be a little bit of shrinkage. And designers typically know that they need to check all their different fabrics, all their different fibers are all going to have a little bit different characteristics when it comes to oh, I got to make sure that I've accounted for the shrinkage on this, or oh, I got to make sure this fiber is going to take that color right, because otherwise it could pill and get those little balls that build up on the face of your fabric, you know. Those are kind of things that happen because somebody did something wrong along the line in production. Or most of us have had sweaters in our life that we've had that pilling issue, right? So with the sweaters, every time that that's happened in our life, if you look at the label, okay, it's always because it's a natural fiber with a synthetic that was blended together. And so just like in nature, nature wants to separate itself from those chemicals. And what happens to that sweater in the wash? It's pilling up because it's separating itself from the other stuff, you know. So we even see this all the way transferred down to our finished garments, you guys. It's crazy, you know, when you really start to dig into it. But it's interesting that, you know, I would say the cloth baby diaper market, I've seen a huge boom over the last 10, 15 years. That industry started as a work at home moms kind of co-op, and some of the first like blog sites so that they could all come together and purchase rolls together. And I watched some of these young companies go from getting a roll a month to getting, you know, 10,000 yards a month ongoing. That's all going to cloth baby diapers, you know. The apparel industry is very big. I think that, you know, designers that are doing apparel really kind of go into designing knowing their market and knowing there is a market. And so they can oftentimes justify having the higher quality goods and putting out these really high-end products and doing really well, you know. And there's been a shift in how the industry works. You know, when I was a kid and I was the first representative sent to big industry trade shows to get people to start using hemp. Okay. And back then you guys can only imagine like how crazy that was, because everyone I walked into was like, oh, can I smoke your hemp? And can I, you know, oh, haha, we're not interested in that, you know. And it was like, oh my God, you know, I learned so quickly that I had to come in presenting my best, and I'd have hemp silk and, you know, linens and things draped over my arm. And I'd come in and go, look at these eco fabrics. And I'd get the designers hooked, and they're going, wow, this is incredible. This is incredible. And then I'd go, and it's hemp. And it was like, what? No, you know, but I see a big difference with, there's just so many industries have lost their protocol. You know, back in the day, you would go to a trade show and you would be able to see and feel the entire line and pre-order for a season in advance. Know it was coming into your display racks right when it needed to. People were writing orders, taking 30% deposits that would help them pay to run their productions, you know. And nowadays I see so many of these new indie brands, and you'd be surprised how well they do, you guys. You know, they might just have an Instagram page, but they've got, you know, 70,000 real followers, not ones they paid for. You can always tell the difference when you go on those pages. And they, you know, will put out I'm sorry, but it's true, you know. I mean, you don't waste your time with paid likes. Go find your market, because those are the people that are going to support you and back you up. And, you know, these girls will, or these brands, there's so many of them, will put out a new design, and they'll say, our new design is going to be available Friday, and you have 72 hours to get your orders in. And then we're going to take 2 months to deliver to you. And they're prepaying in full, you guys. Direct to retail. And these girls are getting, you know, I mean, sometimes it's out of control. If they've got 70,000 followers, then they'll get 12 to 20,000 orders in that 72 hours. So, It's pretty incredible what the internet has done, and how business has been able to shift because we have so much access to information and our market nowadays.
Speaking of market, what's the next big project you have on this summer with that online hemp mall you were talking about at NoCo?
Yes. Yes, I'm not revealing the name yet, but something that was really important to me, and it kind of triggered back in like the 2000s. One of my ways to show the world how far hemp fashion had come was holding fashion shows at events. Growing up in hemp, my mom developing all these fabrics, some of the earliest lines, and being that first rep that would always get the jokes and always get like the confusion and the controversy. I went, how can I show the world how awesome this stuff is, And I went, all right, outside of the company, I'm going to start doing these fashion shows. And I would pick my favorite top clients and get their products in, and I'd go start holding fashion shows. And of course, being on stage and explaining to people what they were seeing as these garments came out, and just seeing the excitement and the look in their face, or the jaw dropped going, I can't believe this is hemp. I started going, there's got to be a way to show them everything else. And I can't lug couches with me and send them down the runway, or I can't schlep hemp surfboards, or you know well, no, for sure. Small items I definitely could. I mean, I've had hemp skateboards where I was lucky if I had a model that could actually ride it versus just carrying it, but any chance I got to kind of show off more was my thing. And I focused on mainstream media and how do I show the world the best to get more interest in what we're doing. And one thing that, of course, also has shifts with a lot of industries is the fact that manufacturers and developers now have online retail. And so, for many years, I've just been doing the fulfillment for online retail out of my facility, and I'm doing all the work, and making very little wholesale margins to allow the retailers. And so we let that go for a long time to help kind of build the supply chain. But I never saw anybody come in and do what I would want to do. And so now here we are, and I'm doing it. So we are going to not only do our online retail, but it was going to include all of our customers. And so not only all of our customers, but all of these other incredible hemp products like yours, Tony, and Aaron, and the hemp wood products, and so many awesome things that are happening out there, because I wanted to create a one-stop shop for people to not only have their minds blown by, look at everything here is hemp, and it's the good stuff. You don't ever have to worry about wondering if it's one of these chemical processes and down the line finding out that you are greenwashed with hemp now. But it was also important for me to create a place that the industry could come together and utilize each other. So many of these brands are mom and pops or stay-at-home moms, or they built out their own facilities, they're growing, but they just can't do it all, and they need help selling. They need those reps and those cheerleaders out there and getting it in front of people. So, we'll have
Ambassadors in market on social media marketing campaigns.
So we're going to do that for everybody, and then we're also going to bring in this social aspect where, you're not only going to get education and awareness and have links like your guys' show available to these people so they can go and learn more, but then we're also going to have product review videos, because we are shopping online. We don't get to go and feel and touch it anymore. So let's do a video where you can get up close and personal as much as possible online, and then I'm going to be doing, we'll call it Follow the Fabric series, where, people will start to understand how things are made. Where does it go when it leaves being woven into material? How are products made? Why is it so important, and who's behind those, and what it really takes, so that people start to understand why we keep saying all of these parts and pieces are so important and why to get behind them.
I think the education side of that is phenomenal.
Thank you. It's really exciting. It's quite the undertaking. It's a lot going on in this. I mean, from what we've been told, there's a whole lot of cool malls out there in cyberspace, but not really anyone that's brought in a social aspect. And with hemp and with what we all do, it is a movement, and it absolutely has to have that social aspect.
So have you considered the virtual mall space, but have you gone beyond that and thought about integrating hemp fashion in the format of an NFT?
I keep getting approached about that, buddy. So we should talk some more after this. Because yes, I have tangible goods that I think would be awesome for an NFT, like my hemp hoodies, hemp socks. I mean, I think those could be such cool NFTs. So, definitely that is something I would really love to see by next year. Like, we have a super awesome virtual store that people can go and like have the coolest hemp shop that we could have ever imagined building, virtually, and things like that. We're going to do monthly subscriptions for people. So, I'll be warehousing a lot of my clients' goods. So anything that's a small item will be part of the one-stop shop, where larger items or higher price ticket items will be shipped separately to go direct. So we'll have the opportunity to do some really fun stuff and offer some really cool deals to the people that are coming to support our cause and join our movement.
That's phenomenal. And it's great to see, that integration like you're talking about. Obviously, we're a tech publication, so I love to talk about the technology anyway. But it's fun when you start to be able to see companies like yours taking a product that is very much real world and then turning it into this, Web3 virtual product that can in turn then support this movement and support these causes and do these kinds of things. So it's phenomenal, I think, to see how all of this is advancing. I love to hear that you're working in that education portion of it. And, just in this, last 45 minutes or so that we've been talking, I feel like I've learned so much just by listening to you and all of your experience that you have in the fashion industry, and it's just been phenomenal. I absolutely love to have you back here, in the future, and we'll talk more about this because I feel like we could just go on for days.
Yeah, you really can. Once you start digging into some of these things that we just never really thought about in our lives, and then starting to realize like, whoa, we really do need to think more. And there's so many cool things to understand and learn. And then we have the education to go and really kind of shift our future so easily with just these awesome conversations to understand more. So I so look forward to being able to come back and, tell everyone what's going on, or once we get that launched, so that we can invite all these people to really get involved and be able to show off to their friends and family that maybe are still kind of on the line of understanding or still confused by any old controversy, that they can go and, get themselves educated as well. Because it's always great. One thing I have always said is when you join hemp, you're going to be captivated. You just can't not be. It's one of those things. But you really have to treat every day like it's the first, because we're spreading these wings, day by day.
We're working on filling in that 100-year gap of entrepreneurial development. And we do it better together because the rising tide raises all ships.
So would you like to tell our audience where they can go to learn more about Envirotexiles, maybe how to reach out to you if they want to, maybe talk to you about a business opportunity, or if they're looking for something in particular? Do you want to go ahead and give us your contact information or how to get more information about your company?
Absolutely. So we're pretty easy to find. If you go online, we are just envirotextiles.com. We're on most all social media platforms, Instagrams, Envirotextiles Hemp Specialists, Envirotextiles on Facebook, LinkedIn. Typically, if you just even start searching hemp fabric or wholesale fabric, we're going to come up. But absolutely, check out our website, especially. There's so much information packed on there. And very easy to kind of find things that may be of interest and request a sample and get it in your hands and go from there. So it's quite easy. We offer no minimums out of our US facility, so we're able to service every designer and every program in the world without them having to have any reason to not be able to meet minimums or delays at all. It's a really fast, wonderful service.
Okay, Summar, thank you so much for joining us today. And Tony, thanks for coming back to help me host and for introducing me to Summar. I think this has been an absolutely phenomenal conversation. And again, we can't wait to have you back and to learn more about Envirotextiles.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Summar.
Thank you both. Hemp Hooray.